and today. I want to talk to you about being stuck in a corner. Have you ever been between a rock and a hard place, or maybe life has pushed you to a corner and you just can't see the way out? Well, I've been there a few times. Sometimes the enemy just walked right into our lives and just tried to take everything away. Other times, ministry needs just seemed so large and daunting that we felt it was impossible to navigate. But I saw God change things so quickly. It was just like turning the page to read the next chapter in a book. He could change it with the spoken word, the easy move that he can make and change everything. And then there have been times when I felt that I would never get out of the corner, like God had forgotten me and I was just wasting away. Well, I was reminded of these times as I read a devotion last week in Springs in the Desert, because the writer just grabbed my attention with his first sentence. He said, "It matters not how great the scheme if God draws it out." If God draws it out, and I thought 2020 is definitely being drawn out. He goes on to say, "It matters not how insurmountable the difficulties if God undertakes the responsibility." If God undertakes the responsibility. And I thought about this, and I became convinced that God is responsible, not in the idea of blaming God for the things that are happening, but in the idea of control. He knows what is happening, and he knows how to turn the page. And he hasn't left us in a corner wasting away. He has a purpose in what he's doing. As I thought about these things, Psalm chapter 119 and verse 71 came to mind. It says, "It is good for me that I have been afflicted, that I might learn thy statutes." It's a good thing to be put in a corner, to be pushed and hemmed in on every side. My devotion read, "Until you're forced to stand with your back to the wall, facing a foe at every angle with barely any standing room." Really? It's good? The Bible says yes. Is it comfortable, desirable, appreciated? Maybe not, but it is good. Yes, God says it is good. And why? Because when we're in a corner, that's when we learn to cast ourselves upon the Lord, to let him be God and let him be our Father. And then he works to move us safely out of the trouble that we're facing. We learn more about praise and humility, and we encounter his faithfulness and his power, and we learn that we are not alone. There is someone else in the corner with us, the Son of God walking with us through the fiery furnace. It is only at this closest touch that you find out what a wondrous friend he really is. And tight corners, they create wonderful acoustics. Just think how the psalmist David's verses pulse and reverberate with the sweetest melodies. Can't you hear the verses that give praise and deliverance ringing from a soul that knew hard times? He knew what it was like to be in a corner and be in a difficult spot and to feel alone. Tom and I have faced some of these times, and one comes to mind that I want to share with you today. Back in 1995, we had come home for furlough because our support level was low. We had just purchased our first church building here in England, so we'd taken on more costs and expenses, and we really urgently needed to raise enough funds. So we came home and we spent 15 months on the road. Tom just traveled constantly, and I traveled with him most of the time. I was able to do that because our oldest daughter, Sally, came off campus and lived at the house and took care of the other kids who were ages 11 to 16. Now, I'm telling you, that was a crazy time. Crazy for Sally, crazy for all of us. My health was not good, and that's when I discovered that IBS was my problem. And so stress and processed foods and all the things, the traveling and the irregular routine meant that I was in pain more often than not. And we barely had enough funds to feed the crew. We were living off of the love offerings, but those few months in that corner where God had us, they still sing out to me. You see, because God met me there. So let me share with you just 3 things today that proved to me that God was with me in that corner. Well, first of all, he and I had sweet, sweet fellowship. I wasn't really writing back then. Of course, I was not doing videos, but I did do some journaling. But my life was too hectic to sit down and write anything. But I could sing and play the piano. And at the back hall, we had a bedroom with a piano in it, so I could go back there and just have my time with the Lord away from all the kids and all the noise. So I would pour out my heart in song to the Lord, and the lyrics would encourage and comfort and challenge me. And there are two songs that still sing to my heart this day that I learned in that corner. The first one is "He Who Began a Good Work in You." Since Proverbs, oh my goodness, since Philippians 1:6 is my life's verse, "He that began a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ." I sang this promise over and over, but there's a bridge lyric in this song that really spoke to my heart. It says, "If the trouble you're facing is slowly replacing your hope with despair, or the process is long and you're losing your song in the night, you can be sure that the Lord has his hand on you. Safe and secure, he will never abandon you. You are his treasure, and he finds his pleasure in you." I sang that over and over and over. My hope was waning, and the process did seem long, but the promise of his continued work gave me the strength to keep going. The other song was a song called "I Choose to Follow." It goes, "I choose to follow. I choose to let you lead. With childlike faith, I'll walk each day knowing that you're all I need. I choose to love you because you have chosen me. Of all the things that I could choose to do, I choose to follow you." This burrowed deep into my heart and my resolve, as deeply as "though he would slay me, yet will I trust him" did when I was in my depression. I chose to follow. I chose to continue following, even though I was in a corner and we could not see the way out. I was in that corner, but I had a friend beside me. I was not alone, and my corner rang with the glories of fellowship. Another thing that came out of my time was a chance meeting with a lady in a church on the East Coast. The conversation moved about health, and this lady asked me about mine, and I mentioned my pain and difficulty, and she did the most amazing thing. She went out and purchased for me a juicer. I'd never used one or had one or thought I even needed one, but she bought me a really large juicer, and then she bought me some tablets that I called grass and dirt. They were cleansing tablets. The grass was rice and barley and other kinds of grains, and then the dirt was a concoction made up of ground up seed hulls and who knows what. It tasted absolutely terrible. But I put myself on a regime of eating whole foods, of juicing the fruits and the vegetables like she told me, and of taking the grass and the dirt. And I carried on this for nearly a year. And to this day, I suffer no longer with IBS. If I allow my diet to get onto junk food and eat chemicals and things like that, yes, it'll flare up. But I really feel like she saved my life. And that alone, for that time in that corner, was such an answer to prayer and a meeting of a need that I did not know how to solve. And the other thing that came out of my bleak corner was a vision for the future. Toward the end of our furlough, we were in a conference with one of the older missionaries from Australia, and his people had put together the presentation for him. He had a video presentation, and his career had been a long time, but he had established over 20 churches. He had a Bible college, and he had organized a fellowship of pastors. And I sat there listening and encouraged by what God was doing through him. And then I heard this little whisper in my ear. It said, "Gail, do you believe I could do the same thing in England?" Well, it wasn't Tom whispering. It was the Lord. And I had to take a big gulp and whisper back, "Yes, Lord, I believe you could do that." And that simple act of faith took me out of my corner, and it placed me in a renewed, invigorated place. My heart was ready to go back to serve, and I thank the Lord for that hard place that I sat in. It was a turning point in my life. And now, some 25 years later, God has done exactly what he challenged me to believe. There is a Bible college here in England now with its own premises. We have a fellowship of pastors, And out of an amazing ministry through our first church, which alone is a story of God's direction and deliverance, God has planted and is planting over 20 churches here in England. So, friend, if you're in a hard place or stuck in a corner, take the hand of the man who's standing beside you. Befriend him as you've never done before, and he will teach you about himself. He will renew your strength, and he will give you new hope and new zeal. For he, and only he, knows the way out of the corner.